Hello, it's Tuesday at 6:30, so it's time again for What We're Reading. Tonight, I am honored to be able to introduce to you the mayor of the city of Walker, a football coach, someone who participates in Kids and Reading and has for years, Mayor Gary Carey. Please tell us more about yourself.
Oh, thank you, Penny. It's a privilege and honor to be here this evening. And Penny and I were just laughing about the football coaching thing, having just run in here from practice over at one of the West Side high schools here. So the book that I'm reading, and probably very appropriate for the last few months, was a birthday present for my mom and dad last year. Book called Leadership in Turbulent Times, and really highlights the four presidents. President Lincoln, both Roosevelts, and then Lyndon Johnson. Doris Kearns Goodwin was the author, and just anybody that's kind of a history, I'll call myself history geek, history nerd, just love Doris Kearns Goodwin books. There's not one that you really can put down very easily. So this is a fantastic book. How this got me through the times, I started to read this during COVID, ironically, as things were starting to really slow down in a lot of ways, and we went into shutdown. And I was sharing with Penny, we had started, March is my favorite reading month of the year, or my favorite month of the year because it's March's reading month at the local grade schools. And I had 9 grade schools on the west side here that I had committed to reading to. And the day before I was supposed to be at St. Anthony's, we found out the school's restricting access to outside visitors, and that was the start of the dominoes over the next week. So I never got to the schools. And talking with all of the principals or the coordinators, everybody was disappointed we couldn't do it because they, even at Central Elementary here in Walker, it was Crazy Hat Day, the day I was supposed to read. So I had a big taco hat that going to wear, and I really look forward to it and get into it. And I found not only myself that trying to lead in really turbulent times for a city of roughly 25,000 people, but there's little people in there as well. So I started to read books. I asked the principals if it would help if I would read in the morning on Facebook Live like we're doing right now, and just read throughout, started sometime in mid-March, and read through the months of rest of March, April, May, and then into early June, and just continued to read every morning to the kids from the mayor's office here. And it's kind of neat to watch the corner, see all the smiley faces bubbling up every morning, and that the kids were jumping on, or maybe even parents. So, but no, it was a good time. And I started this book because it did, in a lot of ways, provide some inspiration, because each of the 4 presidents had their adversity that they went through as leaders of the country, and they also went through, each in their own context, went through turbulent times themselves growing up. And I think the one that still is fascinating me is just a big Abraham Lincoln fan. I have a framed poster at home that has all the things that he tried at and failed, and then finally becomes president of the United States, failing at these 6 million things that he tried. And some of them he tried 5 or more times. And you think of what he led this country through at that time. But I really look the formative years, and this is why those early readers are important. So I want to kind of connect to that. When I think of Abraham Lincoln and you think of his early days, obviously we didn't have the library system we have now. We didn't have modern transportation. And it was not uncommon for Abraham Lincoln to walk 10 to 15 miles to get a book. And it was 10 to 15 miles one way, and then you're walking back with that book. And people borrowed and lent those books at that time. And then what's fascinating to me, and it was something I did not know in his teenage years that I picked up in the book, was his teenage years, he would walk 15 miles or more one way again to go watch court cases.
Really?
And that inspired him a lot to get to become the attorney that he was in those early years, and that I think his debating skills the oratorical skills that he was well renowned for, were developed by watching others. And I almost felt like he watched and took something away from everybody else. And then, he was a big Aesop's Fables guy, and he could retell those stories, and he would read that book over and over and over. And he could, but what he did was he retold those stories, but he had his own twist on the animation that he put into it. And when I think of Lincoln, he had that canny ability just to tell stories unlike anybody else. And at a time when he needed to persuade a lot of people on some very difficult issues in the country, and to even give a chance on him, because as he was going through those years, he was this tall, gangly guy that was dressed in really street bum clothes, as they'd say in Friends when he first ran for office and was elected. A bunch of his friends chipped in to buy him a new wardrobe because they had said, "You need to represent us properly." So, but you think of those formative years and all of the time, there was some adversity in his house because his dad did not believe in reading. And I just can't fathom, that was the case. And I think of coming up in my household, my parents were strong readers, encouraged us to always have the book in our hands. And I look at what you develop into when you're encouraged to read. And I think of our own three kids, and my wife did a great job making sure those kids were reading daily and reading to us. We read to them, they read to us, they read to grandparents, they read to aunts and uncles and stuff. And really just a neat thing. And that those formative years in being able to read and really, I think, tell stories from that books, and how much do you digest it? Lincoln was just by far, I think, head and shoulders above the other three. And then I contrast that to a Teddy Roosevelt, young kid growing up. His adversity really growing up was he was a not very healthy young child growing up, as we all know. And his parents really encouraged him to get into the outdoors and insects and different, things that he just found really interesting. And that's really where I think he drove a lot of the national park. He's probably the one president that moved the needle the furthest as far as Yellowstone and the development of all of our national park system. And then you go to Franklin Roosevelt, same thing there, no siblings. Some health issues a little bit growing up, but he really led a life of privilege, as did Teddy Roosevelt. Lincoln really came from that hard scrabble cabin with dirt floors, and his candlelight was the candlelight for the whole cabin was a candle on top of the table. And his dad never saw that need to read. His mom did. Mom was no longer in the picture, and that next mom really encouraged him to and read to him and really took ownership. And that was kind of where you felt like he really started to take off in that love and the passion, because a parent was encouraging him to read. So kind of going back to those days of COVID, every morning we were asking a lot of our parents at that time, because a lot of them were at home and stuff. So I felt I was just an obligation of my role. What can I do as a leader? And it was making sure, hey, we're going to read every morning, guys, and sometimes short, sometimes long, but we're going to read something new every morning. So, and then I even come to, Lyndon Johnson and his early years, and just a whole different upbringing than the other two, where his dad was a part of the political machine, and Johnson was that master politician. And a lot of colorful language from him throughout the book, and that's what he was known for. And no candor, nor filter, no no decorum at times. So a lot of things learned from that. But what he led through, really, when you think of the times of the 60s and we look at the social unrest, some of the challenges we have as a country right now, you couple that with COVID, there's a lot of things going on in the country right now. I see really some similarities between some of the challenges that we as leaders, as public leaders, face right now. How do we address that? How do we acknowledge the elephant in the room on some things? And how do we keep in context that this isn't going to last forever either? So really good stuff. And I learned, I think, even with Franklin Roosevelt, was not aware of his, I would call it ambition, when he was always wanting to climb to something. There was while he was a not really overt in hey pick me thing. When he got to, you really saw it when he got to Harvard, and they talked about when he was the started the Harvard Crimson at the school newspaper, and he went from he just climbed that ladder and just kept taking these positions. You saw his want and desire not just to lead and serve, which Teddy Roosevelt really did have, that wanted to lead and serve. Franklin wanted to really take advantage of the situation, but made sure he put himself in the situation that somebody would pick him. And even as he got into office, his story out of that book is really not one. I'd call it feigned humility just a little bit, and how he responded. And you'll have to read the book to see, but really just interesting. Very parallel with all four of them, some of the adversity that they faced, how they led through some of the turbulent times they did. But I go back to the upbringing of all four of them, and that the formative years and the education that they received early on. A big early book reader piece. That is, we talk about that third grade reading level being such a magic mark. It's something I'll stand behind that statement. It's a very important milestone for our children to make sure that they are proficient as they're crossing that watershed to the next steps of their life. And I even think Lyndon Johnson had there was a story in there that resonated a little bit. Was he was a teenager, and they were at a county, I think it was a county Democratic Party convention, and they did all these nominations, and it was kind of a tent style revival thing where they were all there, and everybody got to get up on stage, give their speech, and they picked the person from there, but you had to be nominated to get up there. And there was a person that he knew his dad wanted to be up on that stage, kind of a handpicked individual, and nobody would get up and nominate him. And Lyndon's, I think he was 13, 14 years old, and he gets up in front of this room full of all these experienced politicians and the machine, if you will, of Texas politics, and got up and gave a oratorical speech for the ages, and got that guy nominated. So, but he.
At 13.
At 13, right? that age band. And you think about it, but that ability to lead, no matter what the situation is, it just really all four of them, I think, have great stories to tell. And Teddy Roosevelt, same thing. I mean, that was a time of era of really before the there was a lot of the urban cities were developing. You had the big business, big corporations, monopolies at that time before we started to get into the breaking up of some of those. So, he was leading through some challenging times as well, because there was a lot of the haves and have-nots during that time frame in our country, and it's really impossible to ignore. So, I find the book fascinating. I'm on my second time through it, actually, and just when you're able to go back and pull from something time and time again, it's a valuable thing. And as I joke with my wife, it doesn't have pictures, and I'm still going back to it time and time again. So I must really like it. I think of some key takeaways from the book, kind of summarizing up on my end. One of the things I felt, all four leaders, as part of something that happened in their early childhood years, all four of the leaders actually had the ability to discern between sympathy and empathy. And they learned it at early ages through some of the different things that they went through. And they learned that ability really to be able to walk in others' shoes, obviously empathy, and not just feeling sorry for them, but they found a way to take hold. And it was interesting with, like, Franklin Roosevelt, coming from a life of privilege. Roosevelts were an RA money family in New York. And Franklin, it wasn't so much that he had that ability to have empathy. It was Eleanor that had that ability to have empathy. And as my wife, who may be watching this, knows, a very committed wife that stands behind you, is very involved in things. They have that leader's ear and are able to guide policy and decision making that takes place. And Eleanor, I think, was really able to tie into some of the things that Franklin experienced early on to get him to understand better what it was like for some of the housing in New York and some of the communities at that point in time. So, and it's just a little quirk about Franklin I found. I knew he's a big stamp guy, but found that even through the president years, it was something that he hid behind through some of his challenges years growing up and losing some of the family members, dad early on and so forth. He hid and escaped in stamp collecting. And up until the time he was in the White House and through World War II, there's some connections during those time frames. His aides knew when he was in that time of he had the stamp books out and doing things, and he had to be so precise, and everything's just had to be just perfect. As he was doing that, they knew not to bother him because he was escaping from something. It could have been something with the European theater, could have been Pacific, whatever it was, maybe a tough decision with the atomic bombs. He found his escape was actually in stamp collecting. And it was back to those early years, but you learn just those little snippets throughout the book. Empathy and sympathy was really a big thing. All four of them had slights and some resentment, maybe some challenges that they carried over the years. And I had watched Doris Kearns Goodwin talk about the book at one point on a YouTube video. And I remember her talking about it. It kind of stuck with me. And as I read through that book, all four leaders, you're an elected office, you're in politics. Sometimes people do things and things happen, and you can develop chips on the shoulder and so forth. And happens at the federal, state, and even local level. And doing that, you find a way to transcend past those slights and those resentments. So just a lot of good book. And I'd like to thank all four of them too. Maybe the last thing I'll end up with is all four of them had that ability to connect with people. Even Franklin, who had that more of that life of privilege, might have been a little more standoffish for a while, had that ability to win people over. Teddy Roosevelt the same way. They make a lot of the bully pulpit. He knew which hat to put on at that point. But when I go back to, he had that ability to win people over and to sell whatever it was that he needed to get done. And all four of them had that ability. And I think that ability to tell stories, sell your positions, sell your policy, sell your need, and get people to act on it. They were all four masters of.
Well, how great. I have to say, Mayor Carey, the fact that you not only appreciate how important it is for the kiddos to read and to keep reading, and that you were there for them every day and for your children, but I know that you are a big reader still.
Yes.
Not just reading the same Kearns Goodwin over and over, but you frequent Walker a lot, don't you?
Yes, and you can probably see the bookshelf over me and underneath the helmet back there. So yeah, no, it's I try and get through a book a week. One of my guilty pleasures, if you will, is I love to read get a good fiction, crime, mystery, thriller novel, if you will, and I try and get through one of those a week. And try and work it through a business or leadership type of book every couple of weeks. And that I don't. The other one, you find it at night. It's a nice escape into to get away from just you've gone through a long day, and it allows you to kind of decompress a little bit. So it's something that I've done for years, and then typically do go through about a book a week for a fiction book, and then the nonfiction piece. Love the leadership stuff. Love anything that around culture of organizations. City of Walker, I would like to believe, has one of the best. I have a biased opinion. Best cultures and local governments in the area. People come here, they don't leave, and they stay here till they retire. And I know my communications manager watching this right now left just an incredible on-air media career, and just started with us a couple of days ago. And her big want to come here was that culture and be a part of it. So I love stories around that. And that book had that had that ability to all four leaders too, was that culture of respect that they had. They had ability to create that. They didn't do things for others, but they pointed them in that right direction. And really again, it goes back to the empathy versus sympathy. And all four were great.
Well, what a great choice of book. Thank you so much for coming tonight, Mayor Carey, and talking to us about the book.
Yeah.
Everyone, please come back and watch me again next week, Tuesday at 6:30, when I'll be talking about Book of the Little Axe, which is the Libraries Transform book pick. So everyone can check that out at Overdrive. We can all check it out at the same time. And across the nation, we'll be talking about that book. So please check that one out if you do ebooks. I know they're not your favorite, Mayor Carey. You like your physical book. But if you do, check it out and join me next week with Joyanne, who's a communication specialist here at KDL, who's got her own Instagram book talks that are going very well. So she'll have a lot of great books to tell us about. Thanks again, Mayor Carey.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you for
everyone
coming.
for tuning in tonight.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.